Sound check 1, 2, 3, 4.
Good evening. My name is Kira Riley. I'm a reporter for the Arizona Capitol Times, and I'll be the moderator for this evening's debate. The Citizens Clean Elections Commission is the sponsor of this event. As the state's voter education agency, Clean Elections is the official sponsor of Arizona debates, so voters have the opportunity to hear directly from the candidates, ask questions on the issues that matter most to them, and vote informed. All registered voters can vote in the general election, which will be held on November 5th. The voter registration deadline is October 7th, and early voting begins October 9th. Voters that are watching this debate live, you can submit a question at any time by emailing debates@kc-a.com, by texting 408-840-8350, or by calling 480-937-1253. We may not get to all audience questions tonight, but we will do our best. And tonight we will be hearing from candidates in Legislative District 28, which covers parts of North Phoenix, Peoria, Glendale, Sun City, and Sun City West. We will be doing a 30-minute Q&A tonight with Democrat candidate for the House of Representatives, Barbara Fike. So Ms. Fike, you will have 1 minute for your opening and closing statements and 1 to 2 minutes for your responses to voter questions. Our goal tonight is to connect candidates and voters so our electorate may vote informed. And just to review, in the House, voters get to vote for 2 candidates. Your candidates are Democrat Barbara Fike. Republican candidates David Livingston and Beverly Pingerelli were invited but declined to participate. So Ms. Fike, with that, would you like to start with opening statements?
Sure, thank you. Yes, I am Barbara Fike, and I'm running for one of the 2 seats in the Arizona House of Representatives from LD28. So I would be serving with one of those 2 candidates. And I wish they were here tonight because I actually haven't met them. I'm running because I was asked. I don't have any experience in politics. I've been a teacher for 40 years and over 40 years. But I was getting tired of seeing the ballot with no contest on so many of the down ballot votes. There was no one running against usually Republican candidates, although it happens sometimes in Democratic candidate areas too. And that's not a democracy when there's not a choice, when there aren't multiple names on a ballot for people to choose from. So that's why I decided to run. As I said, most of my background is as a teacher. I'm a 2nd generation native Arizonan. I love the state. My family's been here since before it was a state. And I would like to see it go in a more positive direction than it's currently going.
Thank you very much. With that, we'll get to questions. You mentioned your work as a teacher, so we'll start with education. Do you know how much first-year teachers in your local school district earn, and how much do you think teachers should be paid?
Wow. Well, I'm embarrassed to not be able to answer the very first question. I'm not sure. Because I retired from my local school district about 10 years ago, and I know it has gone up a little since then. And I'm guessing it's somewhere in the 30 to 40 range, but I'm not 100% sure of that. I do know that it is and never has been enough. Teacher salaries are competitive by districts. And as we saw recently, Arizona is 50th in terms of funding for public education. And the pay scales I have seen over the years of my teaching, I've seen people leave teaching who were really excellent teachers because they weren't paid enough, especially teachers in STEM fields, because they can make more money in the private market in those kinds of places. I've seen teachers that have to work, even single people who are not raising a family have to work 2nd and 3rd jobs in order to get the lifestyle that they want to have. My father was a high school teacher. My mother was a stay-at-home mom. When I was growing up in Arizona, you couldn't get rich, but you could survive on a teacher's salary with a family of 4 and then 5, and then later 7 when I had grandparents move in. It was doable. It's not doable today. And we are forcing teachers to have to make decisions that they don't want to make because they went into teaching because it was a service. But it's an economic problem of those fields that we need the most, like education and healthcare. We end up paying the least because we need so many of them. And so I apologize for not knowing the exact figure.
Not at all. You hit on school funding. So do you believe, Arizona's K through 12 public education system as a whole is adequately funded? And if not, how much more should the state be spending? And how do you propose raising that money? If you could cite specifically, that would be great.
I think that, this is going to get into so many other areas of this, but the funding is inadequate in my years, 40 years of being in teaching in the Phoenix area in Arizona. I've seen so many attempts and where the people would pass a 0.5 cent tax increase, and it was all going to go to education. And then within a few years, it would suddenly go away because the legislature would take it away and move the money somewhere else. Or when the lottery first came in, that money, big chunk of that money was going to fund education. Arizona has always talked a good talk about, yes, we need to fund public education. And we've even done some things over the years to do that. But they seem to constantly get moved to something else, to where now the schools are having to draw on the opioid settlement funds in order to get their funding. So we need to do what we've done in the past. We need to, when voters say, yes, we want our teachers paid more and we're willing to pay higher sales taxes for that, when that gets passed, that needs to be retained and that needs to not be diluted and shifted around by the legislature. Today, we have a whole different problem because of the empowerment scholarship accounts funding, draining dollars from the public schools. And again, the legislature took what was supposed to be a program for certain students who couldn't get what they needed in their local public school, and they just opened it up to anybody who wants that money. And while people will say, well, giving $7,000 to a parent is less than half of what the $15,000 you would pay and spend on that student in school, that $7,000 is not being spent on multiple students. So you don't get the bang for your buck that you would have if you bought that Lego set that was going to be used by 30 different kids. Then they could have not just the Lego set, but they could have multiple things. And so the funding being drained off and used to support universal vouchers has been another blow on public education. And teachers are just scrambling and they're leaving the field because of it.
Okay. Yeah. On that note, the ESA program, what oversight mechanisms or actions would you take to, maybe cut down spending? I guess what changes would you make to the ESA program if you were in the legislature?
I think that we need to instill some kind of oversight. There needs to be some accountability for where that money is going. I would extend that to, I am all for private schools and charter schools, but I don't think they should get public funds if they're not subject to the same accountability that public funds are. And so if you give $7,000 to a parent to use, and they decide to purchase a flat earth curriculum with it or something like that, they're not held to any standard of what they're using that money to teach their kids. And we need to have, the United States is built on the concept of you have to have an educated population. The founding fathers, with the land grants and everything, from the very beginning, governments have enabled public education with land grant monies and universities all the way down to kindergarten, because everyone has to be educated, because decisions are made in a democracy by the people. And if the people don't have a common, firm foundation of education, then you lose that ability. So I think that there needs to be accountability, there needs to be regulations, there needs to be transparency in where that is being, where that money is being used.
Thank you. To circle back to kind of the first topic we hit on, teacher pay kind of goes hand in hand with teacher retention. And as we've seen, high quality teachers often leave Arizona or the profession altogether. So how would you propose we keep teachers in the classrooms? And do you have a plan to attract a new generation of teachers?
Maybe it's because of experience as a teacher and a family of teachers. Pay is certainly a major motivator in retaining teachers, but we also seem to be moving into more and more into this divisive society where teachers are constantly being forced to teach something that a small group of people who has some power on the school board really wants to push through. And I've said this for years. We're in danger. One of the biggest problems for teachers is that we don't trust them. We don't respect the level of education. They've spent a lot of money becoming teachers. They've taken courses. They are knowledgeable about best practices for teaching all different kinds of kids. And we hire them and we say, we're going to pay you this money, but you have to go against all of your training, and you have to teach in this narrowly prescribed way that the school board has, or some members of the parents who have a lot of influence in the school or whatever, that a group of people have decided that you need to teach. And I will acknowledge that there are some people who maybe aren't good teachers, and so there needs to be accountability and transparency there too. But we need to empower teachers by respecting them, by trusting them. And one of the ways we show that we respect them and trust them, of course, is by paying them more. And but I think it's scary for kids who are going into education. My own two children, a lot of their friends went into education. My son went into education, and then he spent a few years there, and he decided to go on and go to something else. There's a lot of pressure on teachers and on young teachers, and maybe we need to have better mental health programs and support in those ways, which again costs money, but outside of just pay, and pay also to the support staff so that teachers aren't in there doing it all by themselves.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm going to switch gears here just a little bit. So taxes are a primary concern for voters, according to a survey by Clean Elections. Do you think Arizona's tax codes need to be changed? And if so, how?
I've lived and paid taxes in Arizona my whole life, and I do think they're pretty much in line with what is needed. I think that, as I mentioned before, we've had flexible ways of adding a half a cent in order to fund a particular thing. As far as the income tax, I guess I've always felt like Arizona's income tax structure was a little bit more fair than the United States income tax structure. So while it could probably be improved, I don't know that it's necessarily bad. I believe that for years I was a government and history and economics teacher, and I've thought a lot and taught a lot about what is the role of government. And the government should be there to protect consumers and to protect people from harm and to support their well-being and to encourage them to be productive members of society. And to that end, you need education, you need healthcare, and you need all of those things. And the only way you can do that is if the government has some money to provide those goods. They're what in economics are called public goods. They benefit the society as a whole more than they benefit the individual. And so if you have public goods are things that won't be paid for by the individual necessarily, but if the government can pay for them, then it helps everybody out. I don't want to go into a long economics lessons here, but the government's job is to provide public goods and to regulate competition so it's fair and productive for everyone. They can't do that if they don't have money. So I feel a responsibility to pay taxes, and because that's just the way a democracy works.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Moving on, I guess, to another like issue of, within our economy, housing prices have increased considerably in our state, which was once known for its affordability. So what is your plan for improving housing affordability?
That's a tough one. There's not an easy answer to that. I think before the bubble back in 2008, we ran into the issues of, because we were so affordable, we had people from other states coming in and buying the land and flipping it. I actually think of land as a resource that we don't pay enough attention to, that it's a finite resource, that we can't create more of it. And so what we end up doing is we take what we have and we build on it, and we make it more expensive and more expensive and more expensive. And as a way of making money, and that is going to drive prices up. And so that has happened over time with other people coming in because it is affordable and then selling it at a higher price. So that drove up prices. Excuse me. In some ways, and I don't know too much about this because it's a relatively recent phenomenon, but the short-term rentals tend to drive up prices of people want to buy houses in those areas. But it has always been a problem. A city should have places where people can live that are doing their vital services. So I remember when it happened in Flagstaff, the firefighters, the teachers, the hospital workers couldn't afford to live in Flagstaff, so they had to be driving in from outside of town. The same thing happens in many areas of Phoenix. We have to find ways to bring those prices down. We have to build more affordable housing. There are programs out there to build housing that is affordable for kids right out of college who are at the beginning of their job or their career and maybe don't have a second income and money to fall back on. For, again, teachers, firefighters, police officers, those levels of society that are important to the community, but maybe don't make the kind of money that someone else does. I know that unfortunately there are a lot of issues with building affordable housing because you have neighborhoods that start thinking, well, the not in my backyard syndrome of, yes, we need affordable housing, but not near me, because everybody seems to think that affordable housing means tenement houses and slums. And what we need is affordable middle-class housing. We need to have a way that first-time homebuyers can get some help on low interest rates or to create that down payment. Habitat for Humanity and other organizations like that have done a lot with sweat equity. And there are lots of ways we could get people into entry-level houses if we don't keep spiraling the houses up higher in price.
Thank you. I'm going to shift gears again, just so we can, hit all the key topics tonight. But Arizona's water supply from the Colorado River has been severely curtailed due to the ongoing drought. Where and how do you think the state could find more water supply?
That's a tough one. I think water is the most significant issue that we have in Arizona, and it's probably one of the most complicated and the hardest to solve. So there's not a single solution I can come up with. My brother grew up here in Phoenix too, but he moved to Colorado, and it's kind of a running family joke or complaint that he's always yelling at me for using up all of Colorado's water. The water management happened decades ago when the 7 states and Mexico divided up the Colorado River water. It was in years that there was more water. It was a much too optimistic idea of how much water there was going to be. So we need to look carefully at how we're allocating that water that is there. We also need to look at how we are conserving the water that we have. The cities in Arizona are doing a pretty good job with their the groundwater management systems, in that they're keeping track of how much there is and how much is being used, and we have like the Water Conservation Board of people who are really watching that water, but that's not the case necessarily in the rest of the state. There are only groundwater management areas in parts of the state, and so in rural areas there is no help. And I actually learned this from someone else when I was watching an earlier debate. The legislature actually promoted a bill that was going to make it would prohibit you having a water measuring device on your well so that you knew how much water you were drawing out. And that's not transparency. It reeks of a legislature that's trying to get all the water for the businesses that they support or their friends or whatever, and it's not looking at the big picture of the state of Arizona over the next 20, 30, 40 years. I think the water system is very short-sighted. We want to know where's my water going to come through next year? Can I build 100 more houses or 1,000 more houses? We need to figure out a way to curtail some of that building, and builders should be required to show that they truly have a 100-year supply and not a made-up one based on some funny numbers. Did that answer your question?
No, absolutely. And I don't know. Yeah, I think you mentioned this too, but water conservation obviously is a big part of the conversation. And I think you maybe touched on this, but yeah, would you support additional regulation on water use either by industry or by individuals? What would that look like to you?
I know that I think we need to recognize that we live in a desert, and so maybe we need to not use water the way we would if we came from Ohio or something where they have a lot of water, maybe. So I think sometimes there's an education of citizens and businesses that needs to happen. And I have seen some changes in Arizona since I was a kid, and they were still telling us, don't forget to turn off the tap when you're brushing your teeth. You need to save water. I mean, that was 40, 50, 60 years ago. We don't actually not saying as much of that as we used to. There was a real push to xeriscaping and not using so much water in lawns, and I have noticed more of the golf courses around don't have the lush green lawns that they used to. They're finding other ways to decorate. So I think there's a little bit of that, but I have read somewhere that while all of that is necessary and good, it's forgive the pun, just a drop in the bucket of what we need to be doing. It's the water that's going in the area out around Baus, where people were using groundwater to grow alfalfa. went to feed cows in Saudi Arabia, and we don't have any control over that. So when big businesses, especially foreign businesses, come in and rent the land, and then they have access to the water under that, we need to start tightening up a little bit more on that as well. We can't just turn off our taps. That's not enough. We need to have a buy-in from lots of different areas, and we need to let cities work together. I know there was some interest in some cities working together to build a water reclamation plant and other plans like that we need to encourage that cooperation.
Absolutely. All right, I'm going to turn now to some ballot measures that our voters will be weighing in on in November. First, will you vote for the Arizona Abortion Access Initiative, which would legalize abortion past the current 15-week mark and allow abortions up until viability or longer to protect the health of the mother?
Absolutely, yes. I've said this before. It is crazy that my daughter has fewer rights than I did. Abortion is a healthcare issue. I believe it is a decision to be made by a woman, her doctor, her family, her faith group. It is a personal decision, and the government has no business being involved in it. And so I absolutely 100% support Proposition 139.
What about HCR 2060 or Prop 314, which would make it a state crime to be in the country illegally and require local law enforcement to enforce that law?
Well, I was here in the Arpaio years of SB 1070. I believe that kind of go out on a limb here. I'm a Christian, and I believe that Jesus taught people to welcome the stranger and the foreigner. I get that there are some bad actors and some of the immigrants that are coming in, but it is total racism to paint everyone with that same brush. And it goes too far. It targets people by the way they look. There are better ways to deal with it. And again, if I might go off topic a little bit, personally, I feel like the issues of immigration and abortion and all of those are kind of designed by some people to get people agitated and excited about, oh, we've got to fix this. We've got to do something about this because there are these terrible things happening. When in reality, it's all kind of a smokescreen so that behind the scenes, they can be passing laws that make their lives better, make the lives of their friends better, that are kind of going unnoticed because it's a sleight of hand of where they have focused the public's attention on this little red meat that they're dangling out there. I think that the border has been an issue my entire life in Arizona. We have people with families on both sides. We should have a functioning border. We should have a robust border control. And I know border control agents, and they are competent, excellent people. We need to support them. And we do need to fix the border in that we need to figure out a better way for people to become citizens. We need to figure out a better way to have vetting, to learn the people who are coming across, find out why they're coming here. This country was built on immigrants that came over here specifically to work. And now we're saying we don't want them to come take our jobs, but then we have these jobs that aren't being fulfilled. Immigrants have always done that. Italians did it. Irish did it. They were all going to go home after they made their money. It is not a new issue. It's just a version of fear of foreigners that is playing out in this. Some people worked really hard at the national level to come up with a plan for immigration. It wasn't perfect, but it was something that everybody agreed on. And then it got jettisoned because people wanted to turn it into a political issue when it is a humanitarian issue. And we tend to forget that. So I am very opposed to Prop 314. That's the right number, right? For the 2060. Because I think there are better ways and more important ways. And securing our border is actually the federal government's job. And I think our police officers in Arizona have enough to do, that they shouldn't have to do more.
We're gonna run a little low on time, so we're gonna move to our last question. But I think it'll, thematically kind of encapsulate what we've talked about so far. So voters from both parties have told Clean Elections in a survey that they want their lawmakers to work with people across the aisle to find solutions. So how would you go about finding allies across the aisle to work on, I guess, the issues that matter most to Arizona voters?
I think some of the first campaign stops that I made, I told a story. I taught at Sandra Day O'Connor High School, and I was part of an American history grant that was going on there. And so we had Justice O'Connor come several times to the school, and I got to know her, and she was an absolutely amazing lady. And as probably everybody knows, she was one of the first women and few women in Arizona who served in all three branches of the government. And one of my favorite stories about her was that when she was in the House, when she was in the legislature, when the parties would be at an impasse and things weren't working well, they would adjourn, and then she would invite everybody to her ranch house and she would make margaritas, and people would sort of hang out and talk. And then that kind of was the groundwork for people being able to discuss things with each other. I don't have a ranch house. I make a passable margarita, but I don't know that we may live in a different time than when O'Connor was in the legislature. But I think we need to get back to that time. We need to get back to where the legislators get to know each other by their backgrounds, by their personalities, and not by whether there's a D or an R or an L or whatever after their name. I think that's the biggest problem with the legislature, is that they've all abandoned the idea of governing for the people. It's almost a game of getting power for one party or the other. And for a long time was registered independent. I am a very much middle of the road person. I believe in being persuaded by other people. If people have evidence, I want to listen to it. I want to hear it. And so I actively, as I said at the beginning, I look forward to working with one of the two Republicans from LD28 that will be elected. And so it's kind of the way I would approach it, is by working across the aisle. That'd be my main goal.
Absolutely. Thank you. We're going to move now to closing statements. Just like at the beginning, you'll have 1 to 2 minutes, and then we'll wrap it up.
Okay, thank you. In a way, what I just said was part of my closing statement of, I feel like I love Arizona. I think Arizona has a great future. We need to listen to each other. We need to listen to the people of Arizona. So many of these issues that are being referred on the ballot or being debated in the legislature, like whether it's abortion access or gun safety or any of those issues, the people of Arizona have spoken in the way they voted and in polls and all of that, and they have said they want more gun safety. They want abortion access. And I keep feeling like the legislature then passes laws that are the exact opposite of what I'm hearing the people of Arizona say. I think we need a legislature that will listen to the people and will listen to each other and talk about things, because two heads are better than one. You can come up with solutions together that you would never think of all by yourself. And we need to stop just checking out and only looking at the things that are important to us and voting the party line on everything else. We need to take the time to be knowledgeable about what it is we're voting on and care about the future of Arizona down the line, not just the next election in 2 years.
Thank you so much. With that, this concludes our debate. I thank you so much for participating tonight. And to the voters, we thank all of you who took the time to watch our Q&A tonight and inform yourselves before the November 5th general election. We encourage voters to visit azcleanelections.gov for official, accurate voting information. Thank you all so much.